My name is Vivienne Cole. I'm 31 years old, and until 8 weeks ago, I thought I knew exactly what grief felt like. I was wrong. Grief, I learned, is not the worst thing. The worst thing is hope showing up when you stopped asking for it. My husband had been a firefighter for 9 years, the kind of man who drove 40 minutes in a snowstorm to bring his mother soup when she had a cold. The kind of man who remembered which gas station had the better coffee on our road trips, who kept a spare umbrella in his truck because he once saw a woman waiting at a bus stop in the rain. He was not complicated, he was just good. Deeply, quietly, stubbornly good. And then one Tuesday morning in March, he went into a burning apartment building, and he didn't come back out. Before I tell you what happened next, please like this video and subscribe to Heartway Stories. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It means more than you know. Now let me tell you everything. The call came at 11:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because I had just looked at the clock, annoyed that the dryer was taking so long. I remember thinking something so small, so embarrassingly ordinary. I remember thinking I needed to switch the laundry. And then my phone rang. And the number was from the department. 2 of my husband's colleagues came to the house that afternoon. I already knew before they knocked. You always know. Something in the body understands before the mind catches up. They stood on my porch in their uniforms, and I remember noticing that one of them had a small coffee stain on his collar, and I fixated on that stain for a long moment because looking at it was easier than looking at their faces. They told me there had been a structural collapse, a gas line nobody knew about. The fire had spread faster than the reports indicated. 3 firefighters had been unaccounted for in the immediate aftermath. 2 had been found. My husband had not. They searched for 4 days. Then they told me the search was transitioning. That word. Transitioning. I have never hated a word more in my life. After a week, the department held a memorial service. His name was read aloud in a gymnasium full of people in dress uniforms. They folded a flag and handed it to me, and I held it against my chest like I could press it into my ribs and keep it there. People I had never met told me he was a hero. People I had known for years held my hand and looked at me with that specific look. The one that means they don't know what to say, so they're saying everything with their eyes. And what their eyes are actually saying is, I'm so relieved this isn't me. I'm not angry at them for it. That's just what people do. I went home that night to a house that still smelled like him. His work boots were by the back door. His half-read book was face down on the nightstand, spine cracked open at page 214. I didn't move it for 6 weeks. I wasn't ready for page 214 to be the last page. My younger sister, she lives about 20 minutes away, started sleeping on my couch those first 2 weeks. She brought groceries. I didn't eat and made coffee. I let go cold and sat beside me on the kitchen floor one night when I couldn't make it to the couch. Just sat there with me on the tile and didn't say a word. That is the only kindness that didn't hurt during those weeks. Everything else felt like someone pressing on a bruise. Then she went home. She had to. She had a job and a life, and I told her I was fine. I was not fine. 6 weeks passed in the way that terrible time passes. Slowly, minute by minute, but somehow fast when you look back. Like you blinked, and it was already May, and the boots were still by the door, and the book was still open at page 214. I had stopped sleeping through the night. I would wake at 3 or 4 in the morning, and lie there in the dark, doing the kind of thinking you can only do at that hour. Circular, breathless, going nowhere. I thought about all the small things I hadn't said. The morning he left for that shift, I was half asleep and he kissed me on the temple and I didn't open my eyes. I just said, "Be careful," into the pillow. Those were the last 2 words I ever said to him. Be careful. Like that would have been enough to keep him safe. I was on the couch on a Wednesday evening, not watching the television that was on in front of me, when my phone lit up. My sister's name. She almost never called this late. She texted. She was a compulsive texter. Strings of messages instead of one organized thought, and her calling at 9:30 at night was immediately strange. I picked up. "Are you home right now?" She didn't say hello. "Yes," I said. "What's wrong?" A pause. Not long, but loaded. I need you to come over. Her voice was off. Not upset exactly, controlled, like she was concentrating on keeping it steady. It's 9:30, I said. I know what time it is. Please just come, right now, tonight. My stomach dropped. I sat up. Is someone hurt? Are you okay? I'm fine. Everyone is fine. But you need to come here and see something. I can't explain it on the phone. You'll understand when you see it. I've known my sister for 29 years. I know her anxious voice, her excited voice, her trying not to cry voice. This was none of those. This was something I hadn't heard from her before. Careful. Deliberate. Like she was carrying something fragile and didn't want to drop it. You're scaring me, I said. I know. I'm sorry. Just come, okay? Just drive over. The whole drive I ran through possibilities. Something had happened to our parents. Something had happened at her job. Some paperwork, some legal issue, something about the memorial fund, something about the department. My mind moved through options the way it does in the dark, fast and useless, none of it landing anywhere solid. She was standing on her front steps when I pulled up. That alone was strange. She had the door open behind her and the porch light on, and her arms crossed over her chest like she was cold. Though it wasn't cold. I got out of the car and she immediately walked toward me. Her face under the porch light looked pale in a way that had nothing to do with the light. What is going on? I said. She took my arm instead of answering. Let me inside. She sat me down on her couch and stood in front of me, and I watched her pick up her phone off the coffee table. She held it for a moment without showing it to me, looking at the screen, then at me, then at the screen again. I need you to stay calm, she said. I need you to remember that I don't know what this means yet. I don't know anything for certain. But I saw this tonight and I literally could not sit here and not show you. She turned the phone toward me. It was a photo, posted to some kind of local news page, a small-town community account, the kind with a few thousand followers. The post was about a man who had been found near a rural highway 3 weeks ago, badly injured, no identification on him. A family had taken him in. He'd been receiving treatment at a small medical clinic about 90 miles from the state line. The photo showed a man sitting up in what looked like a spare bedroom, propped against pillows. His left arm was in a bandage. There was bruising along the left side of his face, mostly healed. His hair was longer than I had ever seen it. He looked thinner. He looked tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. But I knew that jaw. I knew the particular way he held his shoulders, slightly forward like he was always ready to lean in. I knew the small raised scar at the outer corner of his left eye from a car accident he'd been in at 19 before I ever met him. My hand started shaking. That's not, I started. My voice came out strange. I know, my sister said quietly. She sat down next to me. That can't be. I know how it looks. He's supposed to be. I couldn't finish the sentence. 6 weeks ago, I had held a folded flag in a gymnasium. The department had told me no one survived the collapse of that section of the building. I took the phone from her and zoomed in. The scar. The shoulders. The jaw. How did you find this? I whispered. She explained that a former co-worker of hers had shared the post earlier that day, something about the community fundraising for the man's medical expenses, since he had no identified family to contact. She hadn't even looked at it closely at first. Then something made her scroll back to it. I read the caption again. Found 3 weeks ago. No ID. Significant injuries. Believed to have been in some kind of accident, possibly involving fire based on his injuries. The clinic was asking if anyone recognized him. Fire-related injuries. Found 3 weeks ago, which was 3 weeks after the collapse. The gymnasium. The flag. Page 214 on the nightstand. We have to contact them, I said. My voice was steadier than I expected. Tonight. Right now. My sister had already drafted a message. She'd been waiting until I got there to send it. We sent it together, both of us leaning over her phone. I typed my part with shaking fingers. I explained who I was, who he was, gave the date of the fire, the department, his full name, his badge number. Then we waited. It is a specific kind of torture, waiting for a message from a stranger on the internet who might be standing 20 feet away from your husband who is supposed to be dead. I kept picking up my phone and putting it down. My sister made tea neither of us drank. We sat on opposite ends of her couch, and the minutes went by like they were made of something dense and slow. An hour passed, then an hour and 20 minutes. I started to think no one was going to respond that night, that we would have to sit with us until morning, that I would have to go home to the house with the boots by the door and the book at page 24 porn and lie in the dark, not knowing. Then the notification came. The response was from someone at the clinic. Brief and careful. They confirmed that a man matching the description had been in their care for the past several weeks, that he had presented with severe burns and smoke inhalation injuries consistent with a fire incident, along with a traumatic head injury, that his condition had stabilized significantly, that they would need to speak further in order to confirm identity. I read it 3 times. My sister had her hand over her mouth. He survived, I said, not a question. Not quite a statement, something in between. She nodded very slowly, like she was afraid of what nodding would mean. We drove there the next morning. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my bed and stared at the ceiling and felt something I didn't have a name for yet. It wasn't happiness. It was too terrified to be happiness. It was something with hope inside it, but wrapped in something else. Something cautious and trembling and afraid to trust itself. The drive was 3 hours. My sister drove because my hands still weren't quite steady. We barely talked. I watched the landscape change from the highway I knew to roads I didn't. Smaller and quieter, trees closer together on either side. I had the folded flag at home in a box. I didn't know what to do with that information. The clinic was a small building, cream-colored, surrounded by a gravel parking lot and a lot of open sky. A woman at the front desk already knew why we were there. She had kind eyes and she spoke carefully, like someone trained in delivering news that could go either way. She walked us down a short hallway, stopped at a door. "He's been asking questions," she said quietly. "He knows something happened to him, but his memory has gaps, large ones. Please just go gently." I nodded. I wasn't sure I was capable of speech. She opened the door. It was a small room. One window with afternoon light coming through, a chair, a bed, a small table with a water glass, and in the chair, looking out the window, was my husband. He was thinner. His hair was longer. There were marks on his hands and forearms I hadn't seen in the photograph, healed burns, still pink and new. But it was him. It was so clearly, so completely him that I made a sound I wasn't prepared to make. Not quite a word, not quite a sob. Something that came from deeper than either. He turned at the sound. He looked at me. And I saw it immediately. The thing the nurse had warned me about without quite warning me. His eyes took me in the way you look at a stranger. Attentive, polite, a little uncertain. "Hello," he said, carefully. I stood in the doorway and every version of this moment I had imagined on the drive collapsed. I had imagined him seeing me and knowing. I had imagined him saying my name. "Hi," I managed. He looked at my sister, then back at me. "Are you from the clinic?" I felt my sister's hand close around my elbow from behind, steadying me. "No," I said. I'm stopped. I looked at his face. That face. "I know you," I said, because I didn't know how else to start. "I know you very well." He was quiet for a moment. He wasn't unkind. He looked like someone genuinely trying, pulling at threads in a dark room. "I'm sorry," he said, finally. There's a lot I'm not remembering right now." The doctor explained it to us in a side room while my husband rested. Traumatic brain injury from the collapse, combined with oxygen deprivation. The memory loss was not total. He knew language. He knew how to do things. He had fragments. But autobiographical memory, his past, his people, his life, was largely inaccessible. Like a library where the card catalog was damaged. The books were still there. They just couldn't be found. "Can it come back?" my sister asked. The doctor was honest. "Sometimes yes," he said. "Often in pieces. Familiar environments, sensory triggers, people who are patient. Time." I drove back home that night and I stood in the kitchen and I looked at the boots by the back door for a long time. Then I called the department and told them what had been found. I'll spare you the details of that conversation. It was long and complicated and involved a lot of being transferred between people. What matters is that within 48 hours, they had confirmed his identity through medical records and the case was reopened. My husband was alive. Officially, on paper, alive. And he didn't know my name. I started making the drive every other day. 3 hours there, time with him, 3 hours back. My sister came with me sometimes. Other times I went alone. In the beginning, I kept the visits short and easy. I didn't push. The doctor had been specific about that. Don't perform the memories for him. Don't layer on pressure. Just be present. Let familiarity build the way a path builds when you walk it again and again. So I talked about small things. I told him about the town we lived in, the street, the coffee shop on the corner that had the worst parking lot in the state. I told him about the dog we used to talk about getting and never got. I told him about the one time he tried to make homemade pasta and the kitchen looked like it had been through a flour-based natural disaster. He listened. He smiled sometimes. He asked questions. He was kind and patient and completely, totally without any memory of any of it. Some days I drove home and I didn't cry until I was pulling into my own driveway, and then I cried for a long time. Some days I drove home and I felt something quieter. Not okay, but not destroyed either. Something that was just the plain hard work of still being here. A month went by. The medical team had begun talking about transition planning. He was well enough to leave the clinical setting. He needed a place to go. I brought him home. I didn't know what else to do. I cleared the spare room for him, put new sheets on the bed, left his things exactly where they were in the rest of the house, because the doctor had suggested familiar objects might help. The boots were still by the back door. The book was still at page 214. The first few nights were strange in a way I don't quite have words for. He was polite, careful, considerate, the way you are in someone else's home. He asked where things were. He thanked me for meals. He was a guest in the house that was his house, and it was a particular kind of grief I hadn't anticipated. The grief of being a stranger to someone who should know you by the sound of your breathing. 2 weeks after he came home, I was in the kitchen on a Sunday morning. I was making coffee. I had music on, not intentionally chosen, just a playlist that had been running from my phone. And a song came on. An older song, a little country, a little soft around the edges. The kind of song that gets played at summer weddings in backyards. The kind of song that nobody is embarrassed to like. It was the song playing in the car the first night we ever drove home from a date together. 11 years ago. He had sung along badly and proudly like someone who knew every word and had no apologies for any of them. I had laughed, and he had grinned at me without any embarrassment at all, and that had been the moment, I think. Not the first time I knew I loved him, but the first time I knew I wanted to know him forever. I hadn't thought about that song in months. I didn't turn it off. I just stood there with my hand on the counter and let it play. I heard him come into the kitchen behind me. He had started sleeping better and was up earlier now, moving around the house with more ease. He went to the cabinet where I had shown him the mugs were kept, took one down, started to pour his coffee, and then he stopped. I didn't see his face right away. I was still facing the window, but I heard the change. The silence in the middle of a movement, the way a room sounds when someone in it has gone completely still. I turned around. He was standing with the mug in his hand, and he was looking at something in the middle distance. Not at me. Not at anything in the room. His expression had shifted into something I couldn't read. Not confusion. Not the searching look he got sometimes when he was trying to reach for something he couldn't find. Something different. Something that looked almost like listening. "This song," he said quietly. My heart stopped. "What about it?" I asked. My voice came out carefully, the way you move around something you don't want to startle. He still wasn't looking at me. His jaw moved slightly, like he was tasting the memory, checking it for shape. "I know this song," he said. "You do," I said. A long pause. The song played. That particular chorus, the one that used to make him turn up the volume every time. He looked at me, and something in his face. I don't know how to describe it exactly, the way a room looks when someone finally turns on a lamp. Something opened. In a car, he said slowly. I was in a car, and someone was laughing. I pressed my lips together, nodded. It was you, he said. Not a question exactly. Something between a question and a recognition. I didn't answer right away because I couldn't speak. I just stood there, looking at him, looking at me, and feeling 11 years of mornings and road trips and bad homemade pasta and temple kisses, and be careful, and the flag in page 214 pressing against the inside of my chest all at once. Yeah, I finally said. It was me. He put the mug down on the counter. He took 2 steps toward me and he stopped and he looked at my face for a long moment. Like he was reading something written there that he hadn't been able to read before. I think, he said slowly, and then stopped. Tried again. I think I've been trying to remember you. I didn't cry in the way I expected to cry. It wasn't the loud breaking kind. It was the kind that comes when something long held finally releases. Slow and quiet, not an emergency, but a return. Like exhaling. He crossed the rest of the distance between us and put his arms around me carefully at first. Then not carefully. Then, with the particular certainty of someone who had, on some level below language, never forgotten. We stood like that in the kitchen for a long time. The song ended. Another one started. Neither of us moved. I want to be honest with you, because I think that matters. His memory did not come back all at once. It didn't arrive like a movie moment. One hug and everything restored. It came back the way anything grows, slow and non-linear. More on some days and less on others. Some things returning clear and sharp and others staying blurry around the edges, maybe forever. There are still mornings where he pauses in the middle of something and I can see him searching, reaching for something he can almost touch. There are still things he asks me that he used to know. There are still moments where I look at him and feel the ghost of the grief underneath the relief. Because grief doesn't disappear just because the thing you were grieving comes back to you. It changes shape. It lives differently. But it doesn't disappear. What I can tell you is this. He remembered the song. He remembered the car and the laugh and something that was essentially, at its core, us. He remembered it before he remembered anything else. And I have thought about that a lot. I have lain awake at night not crying, but just thinking. The good kind of thinking, the kind where you turn something over and look at what's underneath. I think some things go deeper than memory. I think the part of us that knows another person, really knows them, lives somewhere that a head injury can't fully reach. I don't know if that's science, but I know what I saw in his face when that song came on. I know the way he put his arms around me. The boots are still by the back door, not because I couldn't move them anymore, but because he put them there himself, without thinking. The first morning after he came home. He hadn't remembered they lived there. He'd just taken them off at the door and set them down and gone inside. The book on the nightstand. I finally moved it. I put a new bookmark in it. Page 244. He can finish it now. I think about cause and effect a lot now. Not in a grand way. Just in the ordinary, quiet way you start to see it when something enormous has happened to you and you're trying to make sense of the shape it left behind. My husband spent 9 years running into burning buildings because he believed that showing up for people, strangers, neighbors, people whose names he would never know, was simply what a person was supposed to do. That was not a performance. That was just who he was. And I watched that quality, that stubbornness of character, ripple outward in ways neither of us could have predicted. The family that found him on the side of that road didn't leave him there. The clinic that took him in asked the community for help instead of turning him away. My sister, scrolling through a shared post on a Wednesday night, stopped. She stopped and looked twice. Every single one of those moments was a choice somebody made, and every one of those choices was a consequence of the kind of person my husband had been. Someone who made it easier for others to be decent, just by existing the way he did. I don't think goodness is random. I think it moves. I think the way you treat the world teaches the world something about how to treat you back. Not always, not as a guarantee, not like a transaction, but as a current that runs underneath things, that shows up in the form of a stranger who doesn't drive past, a nurse with kind eyes, A sister who picks up the phone. What carried me through those 6 weeks and what has carried me through every hard day since was not the absence of pain. It was the decision, made again every morning, to stay functional inside the pain, to eat something, to drive to the clinic, to sit with a man who didn't know my name and tell him about bad pasta and road trips and a dog we never got. That is not courage in the way the word usually gets used. It is something quieter and less dramatic than courage. It is just persistence, the small, undramatic act of not quitting on the day in front of you. And I think that matters more than people say it does. Intelligence, I've learned, is not only about knowing things, it is about staying curious when you're in pain, about asking the doctor what might help instead of accepting the first answer, about recognizing that a song can do what 6 weeks of explaining cannot. Wisdom is noticing what works and being willing to try it even when you're exhausted and skeptical and your heart has already been broken once. My husband is still rebuilding. Some mornings he's more himself than others. Some days something will come back, a smell, a sound, a small, ordinary moment, and I will see it happen in real time, the way recognition moves across a face like light. Those are the days I hold on to. What I want to say, if anything, is this. The people who came back to themselves in this story, and I count myself in that, not just him, did not do it by waiting for conditions to improve. We did it by being, as best we could, the kind of people that good things could find their way to. Not perfect, not without fear. Just present, just willing, just still here. That, I think, is all any of us can actually do.